Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, or I guess depending on what time zone you're in. Today, our workshop and our time together is titled What's Blocking the Way to Net Zero? And so my name is Gabriela Fierro. I'm a board member and co-chair of the events committee here with WCS. And so this event is very timely. As some of you may know, COP28 kicked off today. And this is for those of you that need a little jog of the memory. It's United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP standing for Conference of the Parties. And so this came from the landmark Paris Agreement around 2015, but there's still a lot of work that needs to get done, right, to accomplish these goals. And we've set new goals to get a little closer to the 1.5 Celsius. These goals set during COP26. And so temperatures around the world are already at about 1.1 to 1.2 Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and greenhouse gases or emissions are still rising. And so to stay within the 1.5 Celsius, we need to stop emitting so much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, things like burning fossil fuels, agriculture, animal husbandry, many of these which can create methane, cutting down trees, and certain industrial processes that kind of create a positive feedback loop for climate change. And so this all needs to stop and get reduced by almost completely by mid-century. And so any residual emissions remaining by then, for instance, from processes that can't be modified, need to be offset by increasing the world's carbon sinks. So these are forests, peatlands, wetlands that act as vast carbon stores. And so that balance is called net zero. And so that's kind of to set the tone for the rest of today. And now let's get to the agenda. So a few housekeeping items in the agenda. So we'll start just with Zoom etiquette, a couple things to cover, and then we'll get into our panel discussion, and then we'll welcome Q&A from the audience. Please feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat. We'll be monitoring that, and then we'll wrap up. Next, please. Awesome. So Zoom etiquette, I won't harp on this. I'm sure, I mean, we're all used to the typical rules, but we encourage you to type in your full name in your description. I, for example, had to put mine. I had my organization name as mine. And also, if you're comfortable, please turn on your camera. We are happy to see your beautiful faces, but also understand that sometimes we jump on in sweats and don't want to turn on our camera. And also, please drop in your LinkedIn and other information and from your organizations or from your other media links. That way we can all connect after this time together. And then, okay, so who are we? We typically call ourselves WCS. It's a little bit shorter than the mouthful of Women in Cleantech and Sustainability. But this is a nonprofit originally founded in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so we've grown quite a bit. Now we're in 13 countries and have a membership of over 500 professional women and men. And the goal of the organization is to support women in their careers in the clean tech industry. A lot of us that want to get connected to kind of boost our current projects. And it even helps with hiring and retention for those of us that pivot into the clean tech and sustainability field. And so what do we do here? We have monthly events, so panels like these that we're having today. We also host professional development workshops that are super helpful. We just had one recently that I learned a lot from. And then social events, gatherings that are in person so that we can have some of that face-to-face time and make new friends and new connections. So we're now a global organization. So even if you aren't in the San Francisco Bay Area, odds are you might have a group near you that you can actually attend and meet in person. And so also really quick, so we have a mentorship program. It kicks off in January. Check out our website for more information on there. Admirable and crazy and amazing women that kind of want to give back and teach what they've learned and be mentors. And then we have our annual flagship event, WCS Talks. This is a TED Talk style event. It is in January. It's on the 20th. It's at Plug and Play in Sunnyvale, California. And so also check out our website. Encourage you to check out the tickets on there and the agenda. Perfect. And I promise I will stop talking at you soon. Just a couple more things. So our upcoming events, we have 4. So on December 2nd, we do have events in Singapore, South Africa, Grenada, Florida, and LA. And then this is for a cleanup event. And so if you want to participate in the future, please ping us. We're happy to kind of expand to new areas to get to our parks and our bayous and waterways to kind of help pick up the trash that's been left out there. And then on December 14th, we have a Sustainable Agriculture Innovations virtual panel. On the 16th, we have a winter potluck. And then on the 20th of January, like I mentioned, we have our flagship event. Awesome. So we currently have a promotion on our membership. And so it's 30% off a year of corporate membership, and then 40% off each year of individual membership. And so we encourage you to take advantage of this. Feel free to take a screenshot or a quick picture at the discount code there. Awesome. And then I'll hand it off to Julie. Thank you so much to Product Rehab for sponsoring today's event. I'll give you some time to introduce yourself and Product Rehab.
Great. Thank you, Gabriella, and welcome everyone. I'm Julie Bush. I'm on the WCS Board of Directors, and my company Product Rehab is a WCS corporate member. We are delighted to sponsor this event tonight. Product Rehab is a strategy and growth consulting firm specializing in strategic planning, customer acquisition and retention, and revenue optimization. Our mission is to improve quality of life. I'll keep it short and conclude by saying mark your calendars to check out our website on December 5th, when we'll post Product Rehab's report on climate change impact on American buying habits. Thank you everyone for joining today, and back to you, Gabriella.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. I am now super excited to introduce Amanda. So she is the Director of North America with Antithesis. My apologies, it is late here where I am. My brain's a little. But before joining this organization, she spent a decade at Cisco. And here she established innovative executive coaching and development practices based on individual strengths. She also led employee engagement programs and communications to promote corporate, environmental, social, and governance initiatives, a lot of what we call ESG initiatives. Amanda is an expert in designing and managing programs that aim to accelerate ESG transparency and sustainability reporting initiatives, which includes awards and annual reporting. She was recognized at Duke University's first graduate of the Adaptive Strategic Execution Program and holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from the San Jose State University. And so, Amanda, I will now pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. For some reason, that bio seems so flattering coming from you. Thank you. It's great to meet you all. I've been volunteering with WCS for a couple of years now and just love hosting these discussions. I always joke that selfishly, I learned so much out of just these panel chats between friends and colleagues. So excited to dive into this one today. And as Gabriella mentioned, COP28 is happening right now, where there's 70,000 plus individuals plus world leaders all congregating together to talk about climate change and net zero. And clearly we don't have nearly enough time to talk about everything that's going on, but we do want to kind of just skim the surface, if you will, specifically around energy and EVs. That's going to be our main focus point for today. But of course, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. If you're curious about continuing the conversation, let us know. I, again, always make the joke, I'm in comms, I can talk for ages. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. Gabriella, everyone says antithesis. Don't worry. It's just something that rolls off the tongue. I actually have my colleague here as well, Sky Lee from Antithesis, and she's going to help continue the conversation. Really excited to introduce the panelists. I'm just going to do a quick roundtable for everyone. I'm always just really curious how everyone got started in sustainability, because I think it's always a unique experience of how you end up in this space of following passions. So with that, I'm going to start with, again, my colleague Sky, and then maybe we can go around the panel and just a quick sentence or two about how you landed in sustainability.
All right, well, thanks, Amanda. Yep, it's been awesome to be Amanda's colleague at Enthesis, so I feel super lucky. And also, FYI, I am a little under the weather, so I might pause here and there. But overall, yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm Sky, pronoun she, her, and I got into sustainability through, you can call it happenstance and like totally unintended, but I came from a background of engineering and have always wondered what I wanted to do with my degree and technical background. And in my early 20s, I started hearing more about sustainability when I was in Washington, D.C., a lot of movements to promote solar, community solar, green buildings. And through that experience, I felt that it all made sense to me. So why not dedicate my career into that area? So from starting with consulting in the IT space, I was able to piggyback and transition into energy consulting, and then continue to sort of ride the consulting wagon, if you will, and continue to expand my exposure and experience on both energy and climate work. So yeah, very excited to be sharing any perspective I have with you all today.
Thanks, Sky. Ramya, I'm going to pass it over to you for your intro.
Hi all, I'm Ramya Winstead. I lead global product at Prologis Mobility. I didn't know too much about Prologis before I was really talking to them about the work they're doing in the space of energy, sustainability, and mobility. Turns out they are a large real estate, the world's largest real estate industrial provider who builds warehouses across 19 different countries, has more than 5,000 different warehouses in prime industrial real estate, prime industrial locations. A lot of these locations are ones that have medium duty, heavy duty, and light duty trucks going back and forth. These vehicles typically use diesel for as their mode of transportation. My role is to facilitate and support our customers as they go from diesel, fossil-based transportation modes to electric and zero emissions. So a lot of the work I do is around building infrastructure and making sure that we're building the right products for our customers as they kind of think through how do they transition their vehicles. My background's in engineering. When I was in college, I wanted to work in energy and sustainability, and wanted to do something that was, I thought, this is, work in renewables or something. I graduated in 2008, and for those who were around, it was a rather hard time in the economy where jobs were hard to come by, and I got a job at a company called Cummins Power Generation that makes diesel generators. Coincidentally, it was also the time where they were doing a lot of, the EPA was doing a lot of work around reducing emissions from diesels. There was a Tier 4 final regulations that were coming out. So I had a chance to work with that, build some critical infrastructure. And that's where my journey of both building infrastructure as a developer and also looking at it from a product perspective to say, how do we standardize? How do we kind of bring something that's more streamlined to customers started to really take off. So it's been a meandering journey where I've gone from working for a company that builds diesel to working for a company that works on natural gas, which is a little less polluting, to being part of Amazon and Climate Pledge, where we created that mandate to transition all of Amazon's fleet to electric, and especially where I worked on was a last mile delivery fleet that with big ambitions to transition 100,000 vehicles by 2030 to electric. That is the entire fleet of all those delivery vans that you see in your neighborhoods that stop by to deliver packages. I feel like it's that journey, though meandering, gave me a lot of skills to be able to move into a space that is fragmented, that has high cost sensitivities. And now I'm excited to be doing work with medium and heavy duty vehicles. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Ramya. Again, it's just so interesting to hear how people land in their current roles in such unique perspectives. So, Stephanie, I would love to hear your unique perspective next.
No, thank you. Stephanie Paget. I lead business development at Rhythmos. I'm very excited to be here. And I love your question because I actually started my career. I've been in the power space now for 20 years, and I started in traditional power. So I spent almost 10 years working with utilities, supporting utilities, and really doing business in coal plants and nuclear plants and every kind of fossil fuel plant you can think of. And about 10 years into it, I thought, hey, there's got to be another way. And that's what pushed me into renewables. I actually started having children, and I thought, hey, I really want to take my skills and apply it to the renewable space. And I moved into solar on the O&M side. And since then, I've been, working on solar, whether it was utility scale or community solar. And then I got to move into battery storage. And now I'm in the EV space. So I've really kind of got to touch all these different pieces. And I'm excited to talk about just kind of the current state of all of those. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. And Natalie, we have you last but not least.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you everyone for having me. Natalie Flores, I'm an attorney at Baker McKenzie. I've been there for about a little over 4 years now. How did I get into sustainability? It's very interesting. I'm born and bred in New York City, worked in most of my career as an attorney in New York. And then in 2014, I had the fortune to come over to Mexico. And it just so happened it was when Mexico opened up their energy sector to the private investment. So I landed at the right place at the right time. And immediately I was always interested in sustainability, always interested in the combat against climate change and all those types of issues. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to work with companies that were coming into Mexico looking to learn about the new regulatory landscape, the new energy market, and all the opportunities that were coming with it. And I kind of became this liaison with a lot of these companies, mostly in renewables. That was the majority of my focus. Solar, actually, hearing now Stephanie mentioned that, and everything in the solar chain. And did that for about 5 or 6 years, just advising clients on all the nuances of the market and regulation, and fell in love with it. Joined Baker and brought my antitrust background, my competition background, and I am now very lucky that I'm able to still stay very much involved in energy, because we have an energy practice group, and kind of tie it together with my competition love as well. And so I've been doing that for a little over 4 years now. I'm still very much involved in it, and now we're seeing it more than ever that antitrust and energy kind of have this link. And so that's where I am now, and I'm still in Mexico. So thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Again, I just love to hear how people ended up here. I think it's so cool, hopefully relatable to some of the audience members if people are trying to grow within their careers. We all have unique paths. It helps us create really exciting new ways of working together. So thank you all. And with that, I'll jump into the conversation. Again, for folks that have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. We have some Q&A time at the end. First question right off the bat. Can we become net zero equitably by 2050? And what do we see as the main challenges to block us from achieving that? Natalie, I know you just wrote a paper on this, so I'm going to hand it over to you first.
Thank you. Well, not all by myself, but yes, the ICC, we just submitted a paper on some of these issues. One of the major challenges that I'm seeing, and I'm sure all my panelists have different things that they see from their perspective, is regulation. And it's just because it's what I live and breathe. While we're seeing a growing amount of commitment globally, and that's amazing, there's still a lack of sufficient regulation and incentives to promote and accelerate net zero. I think the key is not just to enact any type of policy or any type of regulation, but really do it with intention. And we're still missing a lot of that. And this is across the board, anything dealing with climate change and sustainability. But then we are also seeing on the other side that the industry is recognizing that there's also a lack of clear guidelines and regulation around how companies can get together and engage in these cooperative initiatives and these collaborations to combat climate change, right? And that's where it touches across the antitrust issues. So we're listening to rhetoric on different sides where certain agencies and regulators are not happy with companies coming together and really discussing best ways or best practices to fight this battle and reach these net zero initiatives and meet these goals. And that's really causing companies to be a little hesitant upon this. And I think that's a major challenge that we're seeing. And so overall, I would say in that aspect, it's not just the lack of regulation across the board. It's also that there is divergence in between every different jurisdiction. They're looking at it differently. And then also we have these competition agencies that are even saying that possibly companies can't get together and discuss how to meet these initiatives, how to reach them faster and quicker. And so it's regulation from various areas. And so I would say, from my perspective, that's really one of the major challenges. And if these policies are implemented, they have to be done with intention. They can't just be implemented or drafted and put in force with a broad overview. They have to be very specific in granting these incentives, telling companies what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, and kind of guiding them in that, so that the companies do not feel that they cannot come together and meet their goals.
Yeah, definitely hearing ambiguity, regulatory complexities, working in silos. Those, I mean, no matter where you're working, that's all hard to work through. Curious to hear from anyone else, any other trends, any other thoughts on what might be blocking the way to net zero by 2050?
Yeah, I can go. I mean, I'm excited that we're having this conversation, because it reminds me of, reflecting back on, why we're talking about net zero. I think, as of September of this year, we already set a record for the number of climate disasters costing over $1 billion in the US. So we're going to spend a lot of time tonight talking about the cost of the things we need to do. But let's also remember the cost of inaction. Wildfires, storms, hurricanes, flooding, extreme heat, we're all familiar with these things. So in my industry, I'm thinking about 3 top challenges: aging infrastructure, limited funding, and competing pressures. And what I mean by competing pressures is, we want to limit emissions, so close all those fossil fuel plants while electrifying everything. And that is not easy to do. Both are equally important. I think we've added like 25 gigawatts of new generation to the grid in 2022, but we've retired 16 gigawatts. So, I mean, that means we've really only added, 9 gigawatts? And then if you look it up, somewhere between 2023 today and 2030, the US has to add enough power generation capacity to supply over 200 gigawatts of peak demand. So we can't reach that at our current pace. So that's number one. Number two is limited funding. So we must stop funding projects that increase emissions. So that's the funding that should be going into climate tech. Industries and investors, they really need to make stunning leaps and invest in our future. And then the one that really I spend the most time thinking about because of what I do is the aging infrastructure. So this includes everything. This includes buildings, our homes, energy systems. Our energy system is experiencing a once in a lifetime transformation due to the electrification of transportation. So at the same time, we have new and expanded infrastructure demand, and we have infrastructure that may not be sufficient. So over 75% of the transmission and the distribution assets, which will be critical to electrifying everything, already exceeds 50% of their useful life. So that first critical, like electrical asset that is impacted by electrify everything is that distribution service transformer that sits outside of our windows and our homes. And those lead times are up to 3 years right now. And so when I reflect on those and I think about those challenges, I even go back to, we're focused on how do we hit 2050? How do we reach this 2050 goal? And I would encourage us to say, we have to think about what do we have to accomplish today, like 2023 and 2024, right? In order to meet that 2050 goal. And how do we create that sense of real urgency? So that's my perspective.
No, that's great. And I think infrastructure is one of the hottest topics when it comes to this. If we can have these grand ideas of how to get there, but if the infrastructure is not set up for success, that's a huge blocker, right? So I would love to hear more from the rest of the crew about your thoughts on infrastructure, where you see barriers. Also, critical materials would be another topic that I'd be curious to hear how we're performing against, and kind of, Stephanie, I love how you put it of, here's where we're at, here's what we're expecting, and we're not anywhere near getting there at the current pace that we're at. So would love to open that specific question open to the rest of the team as well. So infrastructure, critical materials, how do you feel we're performing?
I'll talk about infrastructure. I'll maybe hit on both of those with respect to the space that I'm in, which is electric vehicles. And a big part of that is need access to electricity to charge, and the access to critical rare earth materials to build the batteries in the electric vehicle. So it kind of straddles that spectrum that you laid out there, Amanda. In terms of infrastructure, it's really interesting because a lot of the legislation, a lot of the incentives, a lot of the mandates, they are in a lot of cases fragmented. There's good intention between on the federal level, on the state level, on the county level. They're like, all right, we're going to mandate all our vehicles to be electric. But then on the flip side, what are the incentives? And one of the biggest glaring long pole in this entire conversation is access to power. These are industrial, where a lot of these mandates are going to take effect to transition from diesel to electric. It's industrial zones. These industrial zones typically don't have a lot of power coming into them. They're not manufacturing units. These are warehouses that typically need less than 200 kilowatts, 200 kilowatts of power. Like it's not power intensive. So now you're talking about these spaces that are not power intensive, and you're putting these chargers that are massive, that are 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts of charging. How do you bring that infrastructure? And that takes time. It's because everything from how do you put steel in the ground? How do you build it? To what does it take to design it? And what do you ultimately charge the end customer? If the electrical utility at the end of the day is for public service, everybody needs to share in the capital expenditure that goes into putting it in the ground. If you're doing it for one customer, how do you think about that? So there's a lot of regulatory policy questions that start to come into play the minute you think about, okay, I've got to get a line from A to B. A lot of utilities are doing some good work there. So I think this is a work in progress where we're all thinking about it, but that doesn't change the fact that there's an immediate need People are being told to transition to electric, but then how do they get the power to charge those vehicles? The second piece of that comes into just pure technology maturity. Chargers don't work. I don't know how many of you have electric vehicles. Raise your hand if you do. How many times do you pull up to a charging station and it doesn't work? That is the true reality of chargers today. Chargers, are meant to work for most part in ideal conditions, but at the use cases that we put them in 24/7, 365 days, they're prone to break. And what is missing is that workforce behind it to maintain it, manage it. All electrical systems, all systems break. The way something is reliable is by having those layers of safety nets under it to fix it when things break. And that doesn't exist for chargers today. So let's assume you got the vehicle, you got the power, now the chargers don't work. So that's a true technical barrier where I think hardening of technology is needed. And the last one, I think the largest expense, the biggest barrier when mandates like moving to electric vehicle comes in, the barrier for medium heavy duty vehicles is it's anywhere from 3x to 6x what the cost of a traditional diesel vehicle is. That is a huge lift for small fleet operators. Majority of fleet operators are small, medium businesses that have less than 15 or 20 vehicles in their fleet. So they're not your large Riders or Penske's or the Amazons of the world who have those deep pocketbooks and corporate mandates to say, I'm going to go electric. These are people who are doing it because their mandate's coming down. They may want to do it, but the barrier to entry is still really high. And the big part of that is this batteries, the critical materials that go into it. And in a lot of ways, the more we lean in, the more we dig into, and no pun intended, more we dig into using materials that are hard to find, that are not easily accessible, that are not sustainable, the price points are going to be higher. So I think there is some innovation, there's some opportunity for innovation in that space altogether to rethink what these batteries would look like and how do you kind of solve for this energy storage question with materials that are not as hard to find.
Can I just say something about the critical? And I think I love that, and I just want to piggyback a little bit off that. The issue that you bring up about the critical materials, I think one of the issues that we are also seeing, which you mentioned besides the time and the cost, is that a lot of the areas or the regions that need these critical materials are not necessarily the ones that have it, right? So, I mean, most of my work is in LATAM. So what we see here is we have an overabundance of critical materials, but there may not be a way to actually extract them, right?
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some type of collaboration or cooperation between the countries and the areas where they are needed in the EV industry. So perhaps, as you mentioned, it's growing exponentially in the United States, and perhaps there's untapped resource, not perhaps, there is untapped resources in Bolivia, or there's an enormous amount in Peru and Chile of lithium that's needed for batteries, for storage, and so forth. And that lack of, they might not be able to do it all by themselves, is where I think the international kind of collaboration, coordination, all of that come together because of the time, the cost, exactly what you said. And I mean, I think if we can tap into some of these resources and reduce that also long chain, the supply chain, and getting it from farther locations and so forth, that would really help the EV industry, as you mentioned.
I agree. I think.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree. I think a big part of that is that supply chain when you look at it end to end in terms of what it's going to take. And I think the industry is it's marginally improving on what materials to use. But by and large, I think there is a reliance on lithium. There is a reliance on materials that are I love what you said about how it's not being used where it's either not available where it's needed or it's not being used where it's found. And I think that discrepancy, I think when we think about the world on the whole, it's not Southern California, it's not Illinois, it's the world that we're looking at. I think there's a lot of work that we need to do to bring that equity to every place.
Yeah, and I was just going to highlight as we continue down, right? So we bring in those materials and then we need to manufacture to get it out to where we need it and deploy it. And I'd like to highlight the Inflation Reduction Act. You know, IRA has really led to a renaissance of manufacturing, especially in the EV space, which is where I sit. So I have a number here. So EV Hub said 47% of all EV manufacturing investment has been announced since IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act. So they said like 11 years before IRA, there was a total of 91 billion. And since IRA, which has only been 15 months now, there was 82 billion, which is like a really good thing because we're seeing tripling of electric vehicle sales. I think we might actually have a chance to hit 10% of EVs being the market share for new cars, maybe this year. And, you know, they've said that it takes about 6 years to grow the market, the EV market, from just below 1% to about 10%. And then it takes another 6 years to go from 10% to 80%. So we're talking about like, how do we get there faster? I mean, that's really encouraging to me. That's a massive amount of reduction in emissions, like 300 million metric tons of CO2 if we can get to that level of EV, which takes those minerals, which takes manufacturing, and of course takes all of us, you know, purchasing electric vehicles.
Any other thoughts on infrastructure? Sky, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I have thoughts, but maybe I can chime in on other questions. I think that our panelists have already shared a ton of great information.
I'm sure there's plenty of other questions. I know I have a handful. I'd be curious to hear technical challenges for companies transitioning towards net zero. We've talked about critical materials, infrastructure, but any specific technical challenges? Maybe Sky, this would be a good question for you since you're seeing organizations in different industries try and tackle net zero.
Sure, yeah, no, I appreciated what other panelists have shared around technical, wait, hold on. Make sure you can hear me better, around technical challenges, right? I mean, it comes from the grid, it comes from storage, it comes from transportation. I think sometimes, so I have a background in systems thinking, right? And sometimes if we zoom out, if we're saying net zero is our North Star, right? In that world, we need a grid, global grid that's clean so that all the business activities that we're doing are generated with clean power. We need the air, you know, anything that's in the air, flights, things like that, in the ocean. We need all of that to be using cleaner fuels. Like, we need a total transformation. And I think one of the speakers earlier said, right, so then thinking back to what we need to do today and now, I think there's already so much amazing efforts happening, both from the public and the private sector. So I've worked in both spaces. On the public side of things, you know, we see, at least in the US, we see a lot of momentum in funding innovations, research, you know, and also just increasing adoption of these readily available technologies. I think that, you know, certainly there are some technological challenges to be addressed, but it's almost a situation where I feel like we've technologically advanced so much just over the last 10 years that the optimist in me feels like we could probably get through the technical barriers within the next 10 years. So I almost wonder, right, that as we continue to push the public sector to impose more regulations and you allocate more funding to the communities, and at the same time, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to really work with the private sector, which is a lot of the work we do at Envisis. The private sector tends to have a little more flexibility, sometimes a little more funding availability to invest and maybe pool their money together. So from our work with private organizations right now, we work with a lot of different global companies to help them set what we call science-based targets, as well as net zero goals. And we also help them identify reduction strategies and solutions that will help deliver those goals. In that process, what we're seeing a lot is the need for governance and also collaboration across sectors as well as across countries. For example, we are seeing sectors build coalitions to pull together their bright minds in the private sector and figure out, okay, look, for example, you're a bunch of chemical companies facing the similar problems, and the government is not moving fast enough. If we wait for regulations, it's going to be too late. It will probably take another 10 years for regulations to catch up. So these coalitions left and right are building community power, doing things on their own and really putting their money where either they feel pressure to do it or they really believe in doing it, right? So they're really putting the investments in there. At the same time, sometimes, funny enough, regulations certainly help, but they can also create drawbacks. Sometimes regulations and compliance, what we're seeing in the space is they are creating fear. For example, a private company previously can move forward with like what they believe would be ambitious and meaningful impact. But now we see a lot more companies being really cautious of not doing too much or not doing it wrong, because there's a lot of public and media attention. So it's also a fine balance to figure out, okay, we need fast impact, we need collective power, we need these billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company putting in the fuel, so to speak, for us to move this train forward. And so finding that balance between regulations and private investments would be one of the, I think, key opportunity in resolving those technical challenges. And then, I know we touched a little bit on the social equity aspect just now. So I think to expand upon that, to reach that North Star of having a clean grid globally, and knowing that a lot of our global companies are doing, manufacturing goods in different countries, and not necessarily where the goods are sold. Knowing that, like, we need to really foster this global movement of working with different countries, maybe different, with different cultural expectations, different challenges locally, and really figure out a way of sharing resources and building that, collective power across the borders. So it's definitely a lot of challenges ahead of us, both from the technology side, from the regulation side, and the social side. But at the same time, I'm hopeful that we are all collectively, working on these different challenges, and maybe we'll reach a tipping point where we start to see momentum from all of these and where we can start to bring them together. So, I know the audience, right, is a bunch of us either newer to our career or, quite advanced in our sustainability career. I think that there's so many opportunities for people to participate in all of these needs, so to speak. You don't need to be a technical expert to make a difference. That's really the end of the story. Like, we have people who have a music background, and you can just make as much difference if you can bring in your ability to inspire, your ability to build bridges, your ability to, make it more equitable for everyone. Like, that's what we need right now. And I think that we have the technological abilities to solve a lot of these problems, but we need to really bring in kind of the people aspect to make sure we foster these cooperations. So yeah, happy to hear from others as well.
Anyone else want to add on to that? There were a couple of things that I heard that I would dive into, but I'll let other people chat first.
I'm gonna just say something that Sky brought up, and I know Sky and I had actually discussed this briefly on one of our calls. The social aspect, I often find, is forgotten in a lot of these conversations. And I know we're trying to focus on energy, and it's a very 1 hour. We can talk about net zero across the board, and it would take us hours and hours and hours. So we might not touch upon everything. But the social aspect, I find that companies in general that are trying to implement these, and I won't say, we'll say renewable energy projects in general, or any of these net zero, initiatives, or implement these into their business strategies, often will have to come into exactly what Skye said, other cultures, other jurisdictions where the social aspect plays a huge role. And one of the things we see here in Mexico and in Latin America is that the communities where these projects are being done, or even where let's say the mining for the critical minerals are being done, or the wind farms, etc., they're in these communities where the information flow, or the information that's coming from the companies, from the government, they don't understand why there needs to be a wind farm built right next to them. They need to have this communication, and the companies that are going to be involved in these kind of projects, these large scale solar utility projects, or these wind farms, or even the mining, whatever it may be, if they are going to be in regions or in cultures that are different and that they're not used to, one of the things is the communication with the communities, because it's going to be essential to getting these projects done, completed, and not have any hiccups and obstacles across the way. So I'm glad you brought that up, Skye. I think that's a very important, and it is a technical challenge with companies.
I really love what you said there. I just love this conversation, and actually, like, a lot of times we hear the stories where things are not working as designed, or things are having unintended consequences, and as things move on. But on a positive note, one of the things that I've found across many utilities and permitting agencies in Southern California, which is a huge belt between the Port of LA, between Port of Long Beach, Port of Stockton, lots of industrial zones in there, a lot of disadvantaged communities that are in those neighborhoods as well. The utilities, the permitting agencies, one of the things that they've been consistently diligent about, and actually they spend a lot of time trying to think through this with private developers like us, as we put in infrastructure to think about how do traffic patterns change now that you're putting EV chargers here, or you're building a hub here. How does that change my traffic pattern? I used to have 100 vehicles going down here. Where's your traffic study that would project new traffic flows because of this changing infrastructure, changing landscape? And I think it is a very detailed process. It takes time. It takes a very specialized skill set to determine how to consider evolving traffic patterns over a period of time, especially when all of the precursor data that you have with the Department of Transportation is all diesel based. And so when you move to an entirely new technology, it's a little bit of a forecasting, a predicting, and maybe a little crystal ball gazing that's happening. But the thing that they've done consistently that I've seen is have an intentional conversation and talk about, here's how we want to cap this. So let's kind of work backwards from it. We need so many vehicles at most in this location. What does that mean for what you're installing? Are you going to be able to keep it under that cap reasonably? We can change it if we know better. But I always thought, and I've started to form an appreciation for the diligence they do, because in a lot of cases it's missed. And so it's great when the agency is meant to take care of a community, is actually thinking about the community and working with private partners, not to impede progress, but to kind of build it all together.
I find this super fascinating. I think it's the perfect interlock between social impact and environmental impact, and it just shows that they're not separate conversations, and there are so many complexities to manage, so many barriers, so many silos. But I think these are all incredibly fantastic points. I just looked at the clock. Surprisingly, we only have about 10 minutes left. If anyone wants to add anything else, any final thoughts, any catalyst moments, tipping points, like you mentioned, Sky, that you're looking forward to. That might be a nice way to kind of wrap up the rest of the combo. And then if we have some Q&A, maybe we could dive into those, Divya. Sound good? Anyone else? Final thoughts? Divya, I will hand it over to you for Q&A.
All right. So we have a lot of questions on chat. I'm going to start with the first question, but it's a great question on carbon capture technology. I can ask Debbie to maybe ask this question. Debbie, would you like to ask this question to our panelists directly? If not, I can ask the question for her. Okay, so the question is about the carbon technology. As I said, do you see these plants, the carbon technology plants, making enough of an impact on the CO2 problem in near future?
If I heard that correctly, was it, oh yeah, was it carbon capture that I heard? Just wanted to.
Carbon capture.
Carbon capture thing. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Stephanie. I'll chime in.
Yeah, I was just going to say maybe not necessarily the near term, but definitely in the short term. Because not only do we have to, eliminate emissions, but then we have to remove carbon from the air. So we can't do it without that technology. And I know there's a lot of efforts going on. There's a lot of new technologies in the market today that are addressing that issue. And now where they're really focused on how do you scale it, right? So I do see that being a huge role in our overall strategy.
Yeah, agreed. I was just going to piggyback on that. It is a hot topic, especially in the private sector right now. How do we pull our money together to enable more types of these carbon capture technologies or solutions? Maybe sometimes they're not necessarily technologies, but different forestry, practices and solutions, right? There is a lack of supply and resulting in a pretty high price point for a lot of these carbon capture solutions. So I think that a huge opportunity to bring the price point down and ensure that they are verifiable at the same time, right? Companies can throw out a bunch of solutions, but you may not necessarily know if they are verified or credible. So there's a lot of conversations in the space, probably in the public sector as well, from a compliance standpoint, but in the private sector, to help organizations really almost close out the last mile problem. Like if we think about transportation, you can take the bus, but how do you get home after getting off the bus? So then it's sort of like figuring out how to close the gap between that last mile. And now a lot of companies are starting to invest their energy to enable these solutions and make them more affordable to everyone. So hopefully, again, kind of that tipping point, maybe in 10 years, we'll see a bigger variety and diversity of solutions that people can use to supplement to kind of close that last mile for us.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go with the next question from Srinavi. So the question is, how can we as end users enable investments in technology, infrastructure and financials, etc., that bring down these barriers that we discussed through a bottom-up approach?
It's a really good question. It's a really tough question, but let me take a stab at that. End user behavior at the end of the day is what drives the private sector, what drives people to build things. You need a market to be able to build these solutions. You need a market to be able to raise financing. And so end user behavior is really, really critical in driving investment in certain types of technologies, in certain types of sectors. And I think in a lot of ways, maybe just falling back on electric vehicles, it was back in 2006 or 7 that Tesla had first come out with their vision for what a roadster would look like. And it had said, I remember, 0 to 60 in 3 minutes. It's all electric. And it was such a buzz. Everyone's like, what is this? And over the last decade and more, they've just kept at it to bring these solutions out to customers one at a time. And that's spurred. And effectively, there are end users who've been purchasing this. That in turn spurred an entire economy over passenger vehicles that are electric. And that momentum was so strong that it pushed itself into the light duty. The economies of scale started to play, and light duty vehicles became at cost parity with diesel. And now it's moving higher up into the hard, even 5 years ago, 4 years ago, we were talking about medium heavy duty space as really hard to decarbonize. Today, we're talking about, here are the 3 things we need to solve for, and we can decarbonize, and here's what we're doing to do it. So that curve and that speed at which that adoption has happened is all because of the end user. Now, it is hard to say that which one, it's sometimes hard to say which technologies build momentum versus which don't. And as end users, we have limited access to technologies. The hardest sectors to decarbonize are transportation and industry. Industry is harder. And end users there are now the form of your corporations, your manufacturing units, who need to have that top-down sustainability mandate. And there, I would say a lot of these companies, in the space that I work in, we do a lot of charging for workplaces. And one of the top reasons our customers tell us that they want to put workplace charging is to attract and retain talent and be in line with their values. That's how you can influence that bottoms-up approach to build that momentum within corporations. So I think there's a lot we can do, and a lot we do sometimes without actively acknowledging that we are helping spur an industry, we are helping move the needle. But I think it's collective action that creates impact much more than individual action.
Yeah, I think that end user demand, right, is really what's driving change, right? I mean, and we're feeling it, right? I think over the last, 2.5 years, companies all across America, because of the demand, have announced like $150 billion just for new clean energy projects. And that's because people are asking for it, right? People want solar, people want wind. And so more investors are becoming more comfortable with sharing the risk and maximizing that opportunity. I think one of the things I'm seeing that's finally aligning is like private capital and public policy, which because of that end user demand is coming together to really kind of help accelerate that climate, transition. So I think demand is critical. I think that it's showing through the policies that are getting enacted, through the private investment that is coming into the space right now. And I think it's really helping us to get over some of those hurdles, especially those hurdles that we've talked about today.
I remember I read a study that Deloitte did a few years ago on what was the #1 driver for companies to implement ESG, just as an example. And as much as we would like to believe it was the altruistic reason of, saving the world, there's social issues, it wasn't. It was end users. It was getting more clients, their customers, and their investors. That's what it came down to. And I don't want to say it's an unfortunate answer or result that came from the study, but it is what it is. It's the bottom line. And if companies are getting the push from end users, are getting the demand, the requests, they want to work with companies that are more sustainable. They want to work with companies that have a net zero goal on their mission, on their objectives, on their webpage, and they know that their supply chain is sustainable, or whatever that they are publicly committing to. A lot of end users want to only work with those companies or buy from those companies, et cetera. And so I agree. I think all of us as end users are driving this.
Great. Since we are on time, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Amanda.
Yeah, I think as everyone can see, we are only scratching the very, very surface of the conversation. There's so many questions that, you know, we could continue the conversation for hours and hours. I know that I definitely learned a handful of things. And it was also really great to kind of hear the validation among the different players in this space and understanding that there's, you know, similar shared barriers. But it sounds like it all boils down to some creativity and communication on figuring out how to kind of reach that catalyst point and that tipping point of making it to the next step. So excited to be hosting this panel discussion. It really was a great time. I'm looking forward to the next one, and thanks everyone for bringing your thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. And I just want to thank Divya and of course our amazing speakers today and panelists. Thank you for taking the time to share your insights. And Divya, our incredible volunteer that coordinated this event. We couldn't do this without you. And so thank you so much. I won't keep you too much longer. If you want to connect on social media or with any of our speakers or people that you see here through the LinkedIn connections, please engage. I've enjoyed WCS so much because everyone's so warm and ready to work together or to share insights and to share, especially for those of you that I see in the chat that are pivoting into the sustainability field. And so our upcoming events are here, but you can check those out through our website. I will send a link in the chat to the registration for WCS Talks, that big event in January. We encourage you to take a look. We have videos from previous events. But again, thank you all so much, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.